September 10th, 1900, Volume 4, Threats Against the Perverted World. This morning I found myself outside of myself, and I saw the many evils and most enormous sins which are being committed, also against the Church and the Holy Father. Then as I returned inside myself, my adorable Jesus came and told me, "What do you say about the world?" Not knowing what this question was driving at, impressed as I was by the things I had seen, I said, "Blessed Lord, who can tell you the perversity, the hardness, the ugliness of the world? I have no words to tell you how cattivo, meaning bad, it is." And he, taking the occasion from my very words, added, "Have you seen how perverted it is? You yourself said it. There is no way to make it surrender. After I have almost taken bread away from it, it remains in the same stubbornness, and even worse. And for now it goes on procuring it by thefts and robberies, doing harm to one's neighbor. Therefore it is necessary that I touch its flesh, otherwise it will become even more perverted." Who can say how speechless I remained at this speaking of Jesus? It seems to me that I myself have been the occasion of making him become indignant against the world. Instead of excusing it, I painted it black. I did as much as I could to excuse it afterwards, but he did not pay attention to me. The evil was already done. Ah, Lord, forgive me for this lack of charity, and use mercy. September 10th, 1901, Volume 4. To unite our actions with Jesus is to continue his life on earth. I continue to do what blessed Jesus taught me on the 4th of this month, even though sometimes I get distracted. But when sometimes I forget, it seems that Jesus places himself on guard in my interior and does it himself for me. On seeing this, I blush, and immediately I unite myself with him, and I make the offering of what I am doing at that moment. Be it even a gaze or a word, I keep saying, "Lord, all the glory which creatures should give you with their mouths but do not, I intend to give you myself with my mouth, and I impetrate for them to make good and holy use of the mouth, by uniting myself always with the very mouth of Jesus." Now while I was doing this in all my things, he came and told me, "This is the continuation of my life, which was the glory of the Father and the good of souls. If you persevere in this, you will form my life, and I yours. You will be my breath, and I yours." After this, Jesus placed himself in order to rest upon my heart, and I upon his heart, and it seemed that Jesus would draw his breath from me, and I would draw mine through Jesus. What happiness! What joy! What celestial life I experienced in that position! May the Lord be always thanked and blessed, who uses so many mercies with this sinner. September 10th, 1902, Volume 4, The Prerogatives of Love. I thought that blessed Jesus had come back according to the usual way, but what was not my disillusion when, after deciding that he was not going to take me for now, he began to make me struggle for seeing him, and most of the times like shadow and flash. Then this morning, as I was feeling very tired and exhausted in my strength for the continuous longing and waiting, it seemed he came, and transporting me outside of myself, he told me, "My daughter, if you are tired, come to my heart. Drink, and you will be refreshed." So I drew near that divine heart, and I drank in large gulps a milk mixed with a most sweet blood. After this he told me, "The prerogatives of love are three: constant love without end, strong love, and love of God and neighbor bound together. If these prerogatives do not appear in the soul, one can say that hers is not the quality of true love." September 10th, 1928, Volume 24. One who operates in the divine will opens as many doors between heaven and earth for as many acts as she emits. The glory of Adam in heaven. How his acts prior to his fall into sin remained intact and beautiful, while he remained wounded. How in Adam it is known in heaven what God did in creation. I was following all that the divine will had done in creation and redemption. I would have wanted to leave not one of its acts without my little act, as its company and perennial homage of glory and of love for a will so holy. And my sweet Jesus moving in my interior told me, "My daughter, how content I am that you do not leave my divine will isolated in its so many works, done not for itself, as it had no need of it, but only out of love for the creature. You must know that as you move from one of our works to another, in order to recognize our love in them, to give us love and glory, we find the requital to our love in the one who recognizes our works. How bitter and sorrowful it is to do good out of pure love and not to be recognized. And when we find one who recognizes our works, we feel as though repaid for what we have done, because we gave love, and love we receive. And to one who lives and operates in our divine will, we give freedom to establish many bonds between heaven and earth, to open many doors of communication, to place many chains so as to make her acts ascend into heaven, and make many graces descend for the good of all creatures. In fact, these works of ours, that of creation and that of redemption, have been done on the face of the earth, and have the virtue of opening heaven. And in order to have it opened through them, we make use of one who operates in our divine will." And while he was saying this, he showed me many open doors in heaven, through which many gold chains descended, that bound the earth for as many works as my sweet Jesus had done. Then I continued my round in the works of the Supreme Majesty, and as I reached the point of the creation of man, I thought to myself, Adam lived the beginning of his life in the divine will, so his thoughts, words, works, and steps were animated by the unity of the Fiat that embraces everything and contains everything. Nothing escapes it. Therefore his acts possessed the totality and fullness of everyone and of all goods. And if one act alone done in this way, in the unity of the Fiat that embraces everything, is such that all other acts of creatures put together cannot equal this act alone, Adam, who lived a period of his life in this unity of the Fiat, who knows how many he was able to do? So his glory in heaven must be great, and perhaps it surpasses everything except for the sovereign queen, who formed complete life in the divine will. It is true that Adam sinned and went out of this unity of divine will, but if he went out, his acts remained, because I believe that no strength, either divine or human, can destroy even one act alone done in this unity of the Fiat that embraces everything and possesses everything. God himself cannot annihilate a similar act. or at most he would have to destroy his own divine will. That he cannot do either, because being eternal and infinite, without beginning and without end, it is untouchable by anything, and no one can touch it. Then, while my poor and little mind wandered amidst these and other thoughts, and I would have wanted to free myself so as to move elsewhere, my beloved Jesus, making himself seen, told me, "Daughter of my supreme volition, I want to hide nothing from you, because for one who lives in it, my will itself makes itself the revealer of what it has done for love of the creature, and of what the creature herself has done in it, because it carries them in its womb as the triumph of its works. Now you must know that, indeed, Adam possesses a glory in heaven that is given to no one else, as holy as he may be, except for the celestial Mamma, because no one else possesses even one act in the unity of my divine will. It was just and decorous for our divine majesty that the first creature that came out of our creative hands possess more glory than all the others, more so since the first period of his life was carried out as we wanted. It can be said that it was our life, our will, and our works that flowed within him. How could we destroy this first period of the life of Adam, since it was more ours than his? It is useless to think about it. Whatever is done in our divine will remains untouchable. No one can touch it, because these acts enter the divine and infinite order. And even though Adam slipped and fell, his acts done up to that moment remained intact and beautiful, as he had done them. He was the one who remained wounded, ill, our image disfigured in him, because our divine will, that had taken on the commitment to keep him beautiful, fresh, strong, holy, completely in order with us, just as we had created him, was no longer in him, because Adam himself had rejected it. But his works, done up to the moment when he had the misfortune of falling, that possessed the unity of our Fiat, suffered no change, because we too were jealous of these acts that had glorified us so much. They had put us in feast, as we saw that man, our Son, elevated himself up to us in order to absorb into himself our divine manners, our likeness, and to bring us in the unity of our will, joys, happinesses, the requital and the smile of all created things. We were enraptured in seeing our dear Son, the work of our hands, live in our will, as though in our home. Taking from our own, he was able to bring us new happinesses and joys without end. My daughter, the first period of the life of Adam is unforgettable for us, for him, and for the whole of heaven. After he fell into sin, he remained like a blind man, who before losing his sight has done so many beautiful works as to fill heaven and earth. Who could ever say that those are not works done by him, only because he voluntarily lost his sight? And that since he can no longer repeat them because he is blind, the ones he has done remain without value? Certainly no one. Or if a person who applies himself to study science, in the middle of his studies no longer wants to continue, can anyone take away or destroy the good of the science he has acquired, only because he does not continue? Certainly not. If this happens in the human order, much more so, and with more validity and certainty, in the divine order. So by virtue of the first period of his life, innocent and carried out all in the unity of our Fiat, Adam possesses such glory and beauty that no one can equal him. And at the mere sight of him, all the blessed recognize how beautiful and majestic the creation of the first man was, enriched with so much grace. In looking at him, they can see in him the incalculable good of the divine will in the creature, the joy and the happiness that the creature can possess. And in him alone, as though in a mirror, the blessed can see how man was created, the exuberant love that we had for him, the abundance with which we enriched him. We gave him everything, as much as creature could contain, to the point of overflowing outside and being able to flood the whole earth. If it were not so, if the whole magnificence of our creative hands could not be seen in Adam, not even in heaven would the great things we did in creation be known, and what the creature does and can do in our divine will. It is our love that demands this, and also our justice that wants to have in heaven the reality of that image as man was created, and not another man, but the very one who came out of our creative hands, so that, if the earth does not know him, heaven may know him. They look at the origin in Adam, and grateful, they thank me and pray that my fiat may come to reign upon earth, and form more images more beautiful than Adam, because he was not a complete work in my divine will, but a period of life. Only the sovereign queen possesses complete life and works in my fiat. Therefore there is no one who can equal her. And my will wants to make more complete lives in it, so as to repeat what it did in creation, to make known to the earth in what way and order was the creature created, and the great, beautiful, holy things that my divine will can do in her. Moreover, you must know that up to now I have not manifested to anyone either the great qualities of Adam, or his sublimity, greatness, and sanctity, because he lived his first period of his life in the unity of my will, and by virtue of these acts of his done in it, his great glory that he enjoys in heaven. Many, on the contrary, believed that since he slipped into sin, at the most he could have a glory common to all the other blessed, or perhaps even less than the others. But wanting to restore again the kingdom of my divine will, I feel within me a necessity of love to manifest the first epoch of creation, and the first period of the life of Adam, all of divine will, as well as the glory he enjoys in heaven by virtue of it, so that as other creatures come to know a good so great, they may dispose themselves and long for the divine fiat on earth as it is in heaven. September 10th, 1933, Volume 32. How our Lord paid the price in order to purchase his divine will, so as to give it to creatures. The swim in the divine volition. The little sea of the soul, and the great sea of God. I was following the divine will in its acts, as much in creation as in redemption. How everything had a connection with the human will, in order for the divine to have its place. And since many human acts flee receiving the sanctity of the divine act, not giving it the prime place, I thought to myself, how difficult it is that the supreme fiat extends its kingdom in the human acts of creatures, because it seems that they do not even recognize the divine act that flows in them. Therefore they neither appreciate it, nor give the supremacy owed to it. Rather, it seems that the human acts are like people without a king, without order, and many are enemies of the divine acts that want to give them life, that while it flows in them, they do not recognize it. My God, I said to myself, how can it be that your will could form its kingdom? And my always lovable Jesus, surprising me, all tenderness, drowned by love, as if he had need of an outlet, told me, Blessed daughter of my will, and yet there is no doubt. It is more than certain that my volition will have its kingdom in the midst of creatures, as my descent from heaven to earth was certain. Acting as king, I must establish the kingdom of my fiat that man had rejected. Therefore my divinity, united to my humanity, descended from heaven in order to purchase my divine will for creatures. Every act that I did was a disbursement of the price that was needed and that was given to the divine majesty in order to repurchase what man had rejected and lost. In fact, my every act, pain, tear, and very death on the cross was nothing other than disbursing the sufficient price in order to purchase my divine will and give it to creatures. Therefore, if the purchase was made, the price disbursed, the divinity accepted it, and the payment concluded the sacrifice of my life, how could its kingdom not come? Rather, you must know that as my humanity operated, suffered, prayed, so my divine fiat descended into the depth of my human acts and formed its kingdom. And since I was the head, the eldest brother of all the human generations, the kingdom passed to my members and to my younger brothers. Therefore, redemption was necessary first, because this had to serve to cultivate the earth of the human wills, to purify them, to prepare them, to embellish them, and make them know how much they cost this man and God, the purchase that he had made of this divine will in order to give it to creatures, so that they can receive the grace of being able to receive the great gift of being dominated by my will. If there had not been the redemption first, the disbursement of the price and the preparatory act would be lacking for a good so great. Rather, I tell you that before I descended from heaven, the divinity had decreed the redemption and the kingdom of my will, the one having to serve as disbursement of the other, because it being divine and of infinite value, there was needed a man-God who could pay and acquire a divine volition in order to give it again to the one who had lost it. And if this could not be, I would never have moved from heaven in order to come only to redeem. Even more, because I was more interested in restoring the rights of our offended and rejected will than the redemption itself. And then I would not have done as God if I placed my creatures in a safe place, and my will I set aside, not giving it the rights owed to it and restoring to it its kingdom in the midst of creatures. Therefore be certain, its time will come. I will arm myself with power and with love, and the hour of triumph of the kingdom of my fiat will sound. And then they say that I have manifested so many truths about my divine will. Why say them if its kingdom could not come to reign? My long speaking would have been a diversion, or perhaps an individual good. Of course not. Of course not. I can say that my speaking was the continuous disbursement that was put forth in order to make known what my will is, and that it must come to form its divine kingdom. Therefore be attentive, suffer, and pray for a purpose so holy. After this I continued to immerse myself in the divine fiat. I felt the need of entering into its sea in order to take the necessary nourishments so as to nourish and conserve its same will in my soul, the new act that it has, and that also in me feels the need of having its new continued act, its infinite refreshments. Therefore, while I was immersed in its divine sea, my dear Jesus added, "Blessed daughter, your little tiny river of my volition enclosed in you feels the need of plunging itself into the great and immense sea of my will. In fact, for one who lives in my volition, She holds in her littleness the little sea of my volition inside of her, and its immense sea outside of her. And the little one feels the need of plunging herself into the great one in order to always increase her little sea, and this she does every time she wants to do acts in my will. She comes to make her swim in the great one, and while she swims, she takes the nourishments, the divine refreshments, our freshness, in a way that she feels all renewed by the new divine life. And since my will has the communicative virtue, it does not let the creature go out of its great sea until she has been filled even to the brim with new acts of its will. See, therefore, it is awaiting your acts in order to give you its swim and communicate its new prerogatives that you did not possess. And if you knew what it means to take a new swim in the sea of my divine volition, every time one feels reborn to new life, she acquires new recognition of He who has created her. She feels reloved even more by her celestial Father, and rises in new love for Him whom she loves. In sum, she is the daughter who knows her Father and wants to know Him more, and she does not want to do anything without His will. It is the Divine Father who calls her His daughter in order to keep her together with Him, so as to form of her a model of His. Therefore be attentive, and do not let any act escape that does not take possession in my supreme fiat. End of September 10th. Fiat.